Welcome to the show, everybody. This is your boy, Lo Jackson, coming to you live with the Only You podcast, where I do book reviews based on books that I feel are going to help someone overcome certain battles that they're going through. I do book reviews that I think are going to lead somebody into a life that's worth living, that may lead them out of the darkness and into the light. And I try to pick authors who I feel are intelligent, psychologically proven to know exactly what they're talking about. And today I'm going to do a book called Blackout, Remembering the Things I Drink to Forget. And this is a great read. It's by Sarah Hepola. I give this book a 4-star review. Sarah has been a leading author, best-selling book, The Blackout, whatever she happens to write next. Her essays have appeared in the New York Times magazine, Ellie, Bloomberg, Business Week, The Guardian, Salon, and Texas Monthly, where she is a writer at large. And that's in Texas, y'all. She lives in East Dallas, where she enjoys listening to the Xanadu soundtrack and puttering in her garden when she remembers she has one. Well, Sarah sounds pretty cool. She's the host and creator of America's Girls, an 8-part podcast on the lost history and culture impact of the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, a series that no less than Vogue magazine said expertly complicates America's cheerleading obsession. Sarah never knew she was a cat person until she got a cat. What might happen if she got a dragon? Follow her on Twitter at Sarah Hepola, which it's SarahHepola. And she's on Instagram at the Sarah Hepola Experience. And she's also on Facebook, you guys. And today I'm doing the book review on the book she wrote called Blackout, Remembering the Things I Drank to Forget. You can find it at Barnes & Noble for $15.99. It's at Amazon for $13.89. You can find it also at Walmart for $9.33. And it's on Audible from $15 to $28. It's also on Kindle for $10.99. And you can get it on Amazon. Hardback is $16.98 and paperback is $13.89. That's actually on sale at Amazon with 35% off as we speak, as of today. And that's the middle of September right now. So this book actually dives into how Sarah got taken advantage of by alcohol and all the tragic things that came her way due to her addiction. And I don't know if anybody out there knows anything about addiction, which obviously they probably do. But you know what, people? There's some people out there that have no idea about addiction and how it works. You know, the Alcoholic Anonymous book was written in 1939 by Bill W. And, it's one of the greatest books because in 1939 it was about a guy that was drunk and he was running around trying to make a phone call to get a hold of somebody. So he didn't have another drink. He just needed to talk to somebody to get that out of his system. You know, and actually the 12 steps were, I believe, was written in 1953 if I remember correctly. And this is the Only You podcast. It's your boy Lo Jackson. Today I'm doing Blackout, Remembering the Things I Drink to Forget. It's a great read. I found it on Google Books. It's by Sarah Hepola. I think Sarah is a great writer. She's young and vibrant. She has knowledge. She understands what happened to her with her drinking addiction and how it took a hold of her and how she almost lost her life, you guys. I think you should run out and buy this book because it talks also about certain things like, you know, she gives you ideas about like Pavlov's classic conditioning or trigger theory. I don't know if anybody knows who Mr. Pavlov was, but Ivan Pavlov was a psychologist that he did a study. His most famous study is classical conditioning, and it was a study done on dogs that at the sight of food they would salivatate. So he knew that there was such things that caused triggers. So, you know, with alcohol, you know, people, places, and things are considered triggers. You know, a certain song, a certain smell, a laugh, you know, a certain sound could trigger somebody to go use again. But here we are with the introduction to Blackout, Remembering the Things I Drink to Forget, by Sarah Hepola. Women who drink. I was 33 and lying on a futon in the middle of the day watching a talk show because I could. I was a freelance writer in New York and I was hungover. And tried to stop me. The show was discussing roofies, GHB, Rufalin, the date rape drug. This was 2007, but I'd been hearing about roofies since the late 90s. Odorless, colorless substances dropped into a drink to erase memory, like something out of a sci-fi movie. I'd recently seen a network crime drama in which the heroine was slipped a roofie and woke up in a dangerous man's house. Every once in a while, motherly types, including my actual mother, worried I might be vulnerable to this invisible menace. The talk show host, for one, was very concerned. Ladies, cover your drinks. I had a different drinking problem, although I wouldn't have used the word problem, at least not without air quotes. One morning, I woke up in the living room of a cute British guy's apartment. The inflatable mattress was leaking and my ass was scraping the ground in a plastic hammock. The last thing I remember was walking my friend Lisa to the subway the night before. She held both my hands. "Do not go home with that guy," she said. And I said, "I promise, pinky swear." Then I went back into the bar and he ordered us another round. This was the kind of excitement I wanted from a single life in New York. The kind of excitement I was hoping to find when I left Texas at the age of 31 in a Honda loaded down with books and heartbreak. I understood the city was not the shimmering fantasia portrayed by charming Audrey Hepburn movies and Woody Allen Valentines and Four Fancy Ladies on HBO, but I wanted my own stories, and I understood drinking to be the gasoline of all adventure. The best evenings were the ones you might regret. I had sex with some random British dude and woke up on a leaking air mattress. I text my friend Stephanie. "Congratulations," she texts back. "Awesome, high five, hell yeah." These were the responses I got from female friends when I told them about my drunken escapades. Most of my friends were married by this point. Sometimes they wondered aloud what being unattached in their 30s would be like. Careening around the city at 2 a.m. Probably pretty boring in my eyes. Tilting the wide brim of a martini glass toward the sky to catch whatever plunked into it. Being unattached in my 30s felt good. I wasn't so lonely. Reality TV was quite robust that year. Design programs, chef programs, musicians who used to be famous dating women who hoped to become famous. That roofie talk show made it seem like being a single woman was peerless and you had to be on guard at all times. But but I was numb to terror alerts by then. Whatever horror exists in the world, I was pretty sure GHB was not my problem. Once I had gotten so blasted at a party, I woke up in a dog bed in someone else's house. "Do you think you got roofied?" my friend asked me. "Yes," I told her. "I think someone slipped me 10 drinks. Books about alcoholism. I laugh, but it's actually not really funny. It's actually a very serious addiction and very serious disease. Alcoholism, that is. Books about alcoholism often talk about the hidden drinking of women. That's been the line for decades. Bottles stashed behind the potted plant, sips taken with shaking hands when no one is looking. Because society looks down on women who drink. I think society looks down on anybody that drinks. I looked up to women who drink. My heart belonged to the defiant ones, the cigarette smokers, the pants wearers, the ones who gave a stiff arm to history. In college, we drank like the boys. After college, we hung around in dive bars with our male friends. And later, when everyone grew lousy with expandable income and the freedom of having no kids, we drained bottles of Cabernet over steak dinners and debated the smoothest blends of Mexican tequila. I joined a women's book club when I was in my late 20s. It was called Bitches and Books. It sounds pretty awesome to me. Your boy Lo Jackson's going to be over there doing book reviews for the whole group soon. I'm on my way, girls. Which seemed funny at the time. We gathered once a month and balanced tiny white plates of brie and crackers on our knees as we discussed Ann Patchett and Augustine Burroughs and drank wine. Rivers of wine, waterfalls of wine, wine and confusion. Wine and sisterhood, actually. Wine had become our social glue, the mechanism of our bonding. We needed the wine to shut out the jackhammers of our own perfectionism and unlock the secrets we kept within. Wine was the centerpiece of dinner parties and relaxing evenings at home. It was a requirement for work events and formal festivities. Let's not even mention the word bachelorette. Friends moved their weddings out of churches and into restaurants and bars where waiters served champagne before the bride had even appeared. The cool mothers had Chardonnay play dates and never let the demand of children rearing keep them from happy hour. DIY sites sold onesies with a wink. Mommy drinks because I cry. I wrote stories about my drinking. Some were fiction and some were painfully true. And I like that my snappy comic tone made it hard to tell which was which. I wrote about getting wasted before 4 p.m., true, and waking up after a hard partying music festival next to a Chuck Klosterman, not true, slamming shots with strangers and drinking queso from a Togo cup, more or less true. Women today are notorious for judging each other about how we raise children, about how we look in a swimsuit, about how we discuss race, gender, or class. Yet, no matter how reckless or boozing my tales were, I never felt judged for one of them. In fact, I kind of thought women looked up to me. By the late aughts, bumbling Blodo heroines were a staple of our narratives. Bridget Jones' Diaries was like a tree that had grown 1,000 limbs. Carrie Bradshaw was a media empire. Chelsea Handler was building a savvy business brand, playing the part of a woman much drunker and more foolish than she could possibly be. Was there any book title more indicative of the moment than Are You There, Vodka? It's me, Chelsea. A longing for spiritual deliverance, the innocence of young adult literature, and Grey Goose. My smart, successful female friends tore through their U.S. weeklies while New Yorkers piled on a corner table like homework and followed the misadventures of the era's party girls. In an age of sex tapes and beaver shots, there was nothing edgy or remotely shocking about a woman like me reporting that, hey, everyone, I fell off my bar stool. I sometimes wondered what my mother thought. Well, I think you exaggerated, she told me once. In the personal essay I had just written, for example, I mentioned having 6 beers. I don't think a woman can have that many drinks in one night, she said. And my mother was right. It was more like 8. Yeah, I've been there. We've all been there, I think. And if we haven't, some of us are still there, I think. You know, you got to know when to say when. And some of us don't have a shutoff. And some of us don't know how to say when. Because we're already addicted. They add up fast. 2 drinks at home getting ready. 3 drinks with dinner. 3 pints at the bar afterwards. And those were the nights I kept count. My mother never drank like me. She was a sipper. A 1 glass with dinner kind of lady. She tells me she cut loose at college frat parties, dancing in her bobby socks, a phase that suggests how wild she did not get, but I've never seen her drunk and couldn't imagine what it would look like. When her extended family got together, my rowdy Irish uncles gathered in a separate room, splitting a bottle of scotch and laughing loudly enough to rattle the walls while my mother and her sisters took care of the kids. Screw that. I wanted to be the center of the party, not the person sweeping up afterwards. Get it, sister? Sounds like all my sisters. By the time I was old enough to drink, culture had shifted to accommodate my desires. For generations, women had been the abstainers, the watchdogs, the caretakers. Women were a major force behind prohibition after all, but as women's place in society rose, no, actually women's place didn't rise. Women fought and made their place rise, and now that's how we've gotten to where we are today, falling apart at the seams. So, did their consumption and 70s feminists ushered in a new spirit of equal opportunity drinking? Over the following decades, as men turned away from the bottle, women did not, which meant that by the 21st century, when it came to drinking, women had nearly closed the gender gap. That's sad. A 2013 CDC report declared binge drinking a dangerous health problem for women 18 to 34. Especially whites and Hispanics. Nearly 14 million women in the country enjoyed an average of 3 beverages a month, 6 drinks at a time. That equates to a hell of a lot of book clubs. It's worth noting that the country as a whole is drinking less than we used to when alcohol hit its peak in the 1970s. The result of a higher drinking age and a shift away from 3 martini lunches after other factors, but a certain group of women have made booze a very public and very integral part of their culture. Young, educated, and drunk, that was life on the ground for me. I thought nothing of spending most evenings in a bar because that's what my friends were doing. I thought nothing of mandating wine bottles for any difficult conversation, for any conversation at all, because that's what I saw in movies and television. Glasses of wine and becoming shorthand for honest communication. Clink, clink, here's to us. Yeah, many more. I have found the Hollywood empowerment tales of "you go, girl" to be patronizing, but that doesn't mean they didn't capture my value system. Empowerment. It was an early buzzword for the 21st century. Everything from building school in third world countries to emailing pictures of your ass to strangers became empowering. For years, I kept an onion story tacked above my desk. Women now empowered by everything a woman does. The words ubiquity suggested how much women wanted power, but conflicted we were about getting it. But how conflicted we were about getting it. Ripping your pubic hair out by the roots was empowerment. Taking Jägermeister shots at the bar was empowerment. I just wish those shots had empowered me not to trip off the curb. I did worry I drank too much. Actually, I had worried for a long time. I slipped into a club one night and bashed my kneecap. I fell down staircases, yes, plural. Sometimes I only skidded down a few steps, gravity problems. I used to joke, and then a few times I sailed to the bottom like a rag doll, and I'm not sure which is crazier, that I drank as long as I did or that I kept wearing heels. I think I knew I was in trouble. The small, still voice inside me always knew. I didn't hide the drink, but I hid how much it hurt. And I gotta say, I totally relate to that part right there. I think I knew I was in trouble. The small, still voice inside me always knew. I didn't hide the drink, but I hid how much it hurt. And I think a lot of us that have drinking problems hide how much it hurts. And I did that for probably 15 years of my life. I had a severe drinking problem that wound up led to many arrests. And in reality, I wound up losing my license for almost, a decade. I lost my license for a decade over drinking and driving. And once I had a lawyer and I went to court to get my license, my lawyer looked at me and said, "Have you looked at this?" And he shows me this piece of paper. And he's like, "That's your chronological use history." And I'm like, "Yeah, what about it?" He's like, what was going on between 2004 and 2009? And I was like, oh, I went through a divorce, and he's like, well, that was the worst thing that ever happened to you, because that's where all your heightened drinking came from and all your problems came from, was that marriage. And now you don't have any of those problems because you're not married to that person anymore, and you made the right choice. I couldn't believe it, but in those moments I realized how many, just like her, all the slipping and falling, and how many times I had fallen and hurt myself, or how many times I've seen my friends fall and hurt themselves, or say things that were so off the wall and stupid because of alcohol. Only 3% of the population is actually immune to alcohol. Anybody who says, oh, I'm good, I got this, man, I know how to control my drinking. No, you don't. You're full of it. You're lying. Alcohol stays in your system for up to 4 weeks, and it clouds your judgment for months. And that's why when you have a hangover, you're like, oh, I'm never drinking again. I'm never drinking again. And then once 4 weeks is up, you go right back to the bar, because that actually the alcohol you had 4 weeks before finally wore off. The half-life of the alcohol you put in your system finally wore off. And if you don't know what a half-life is, look it up. Half-life's what farmers use like on fields with pesticides. Pesticides have half-lives, and that's what causes lots of cancers and certain things like that. Because once you spray a pesticide, it stays on the ground for 20 years. Well, farmers didn't know that back in the day when they were making pesticides. They just kept applying it year after year after year. And guess what? Now we're having issues with our drinking water. We're having issues with our food. We're having issues with antibiotics and growth problems and females and male human beings, because of this stuff. And we all have somebody in our family that suffers from alcoholism. This stuff is no joke. There's Al-Anon, there's Alcoholics Anonymous, there's Narcotics Anonymous, there's Sex Anonymous for sex addicts. And all these different groups, it's there's autonomy. What is it? I can't think of the word right now. But, it's like where nobody gets to know that you're involved there. You're autonomous. Yeah, autonomous. That's what it is. And that's one thing I loved when I found AA back in 2015. I've been sober actually since December 18th, 2015. I checked myself into detox out in Phoenix, Arizona, and I have never once entertained drinking ever again. I want to share my story with you guys right now. We're doing the book review Blackout by Sarah Hepola. Remembering the things I drink to forget. And my story goes like this. I decided to quit drinking on December 18th, 2015. I had bought 2 Motley Crue tickets, front stage tickets, front row seats. I handed them to the guy next to me at the bar and said, hey, this concert's going on in 2 hours. These tickets were $600. Go have the time of your life. The guy looked at me like he won the lottery. He looked so crazy. He's like, are you sure? Are you sure? And I said, yeah, I'm dead serious. I went out, called an Uber, and I told him to take me downtown to Community Bridges. And I checked myself into detox. And when I got there, they gave me Valium for whatever reasons, because Valium actually helps counteract the withdrawals you have from alcohol. And if you guys don't know this, alcohol actually has the worst withdrawal symptoms, worse than heroin, worse than fentanyl, worse than ecstasy, worse than marijuana, worse than anything. Alcohol is the number one of the worst things to have to come down on your own, because alcohol actually affects your body physically, not mentally. See, now heroin, it's a mental game. Marijuana, that's a mental game. Now alcohol, it affects your body physically, which that's not true. Heroin and fentanyl can also affect your body physically too, but scientific studies have proven that alcohol is way worse on all your organs than all those other drugs. So anyways, They asked me to go to my first AA meeting. I had never heard of AA. I had never been to AA. And so I go into this AA meeting. There's a 27-year-old to my right, a 23-year-old to my left, and several other people in this meeting during that time. The 27-year-old kid says, hey, I'm so-and-so. I'm an alcoholic. I'm 27 years old. And I mean, this kid is totally wasted. And he's standing up. Next thing you know, he falls on the floor, starts having... he starts convulsing so bad that he's arching his whole body's like literally like his ankles are on the floor and his neck's on the floor, and that's how bad he's convulsing. Convulses really hard finally, and just I watch his life slip out of his body and disappear into the night. I laid there motionless, still highly intoxicated from my bar venture that day, and they brought in a stretcher. They put that gentleman in a body bag. He was 27 years old, and he lost his life to one night of drinking. But the AA meeting continued on that night. I said who I was. I stood up, said who I was and everything, and passed on the torch to the 23-year-old next to me. The 23-year-old stands up, says who he is, says he's an alcoholic, and next thing you know, he falls down, starts having a seizure, which he did not die, though, but he did have a seizure. And those two gentlemen right there in those moments made me promise myself to God that I would never put my family in jeopardy, because when we are under the power of alcohol, at times we will hurt anybody and everybody. We'll lie, cheat, steal. We don't care. It don't affect us any. But that's my story, and that's why I don't drink, because I watched two of those guys fall out like that, and then I learned that night from the nurse that alcohol is the worst drug to have to come down off of, because it actually affects your lungs, heart, your everything in your body physically. And back to Blackout by Sarah Hepola. I was 20 years old when I first started worrying I drank too much. I picked up one of those pamphlets at the student health center. Do you think you have a drinking problem? I was in college. I was pretty sure everyone I knew had a drinking problem. My photo album was flip book of evidence. My friend Dave with a bottle of Jim Beam to his lips. My friend Ann passed out on the couch with a red Solo cup still upright in her hand. Heroic postures of sin and debauchery. But there was something troubling about the way I drank. Friends would inchworm up to me on Sundays when our apartment was still racked with stink and regret. Hey, so we need to talk. They tried to sound casual, like we were going to chat about boys and nail polish, but the next 8 words were like needles sunk into my skin. Do you remember what you did last night? God, I hate those nights. I used to so hate drinking so bad when people would do that. Do you remember what you did last night? I'm like, no, what did I do? Or I'd go back to the bar where I was like throwing out on my face the night before. I did that one time in Phoenix. I got 86th out of every single bar on 32nd Street one night at the heightening of my drinking at the end of it. What a nightmare. And I know a lot of you guys have been through all that stuff too, and you have your stories, but always remember, there's that 200-pound gorilla in the closet doing push-ups, begging you to take that next drink to let him out of there so he can devastate you even worse than you ever thought was possible. And that's how I live my life, and I keep that gorilla story close to my vest because I know he's in there doing push-ups, begging me to go back to the bar so he can show me what he's really about now, because he's had 10 years to be sober, and he's been doing push-ups just waiting for the moment for me to slip up with alcohol so he can annihilate me. And that's what he does. And that's what he does to everybody out there that has a drinking problem or a drug problem. And so the pamphlet, it was such a corny, flimsy thing. I had probably been languishing on the rack of good intentions since the late 1980s. The language was so alarmist and parental. Have you ever had a hangover? Come on. I felt pity for the wallflower who answered no to this question. Drinking at least 3 times a week was a fundamental to my education as choosing a major. My friends and I didn't hang with anyone who didn't party. There was something untrustworthy about people who crossed their arms at the chance. Next question. Do you ever drink to get drunk? Good Lord. Why else would a person drink? To cure cancer? This was stupid. I had come to that health clinic with real fear in my heart, but already I felt foolish for being so dramatic. Do you ever black out? Wait, that one. That question right there. Do you ever black out? I did. I blacked out the first time I got drunk, and it happened again and again. Some blackouts were benign. The last few hours of an evening turned into a blurry strobe. Some were extravagant, like the one that brought me to the health clinic. After waking up in my parents' house and having no idea how I got there, 3 hours gone from my brain. During uncomfortable conversations with my friends, I would listen in disbelief as they told stories about me and that were like the work of an evil twin. I said, what? I did that? You guys, I actually wrote a song once called What? I Did That. For real. Because it was about drinking and all the stupid stuff that you do. And then when people were like, do you remember last night? Oh, those are some of the worst feelings. But we can all be forgiven. And just because you have those feelings and those memories, it doesn't mean that those memories are you. They are something that happened that you did, but you've learned from, and now you can grow on from those things. And that's what I do with all the things that when I think about the stupid stuff I've done while I was under the influence, I've forgiven myself and I move forward. I don't sit there and dwell on that crap because it ain't worth it. But I didn't want to betray how little I knew. I wanted to eject from those discussions as quickly as possible, so I would nod and tell them I felt terrible about what I'd done, whatever it turned out to be. The soft language of disalarmament, I hear you, you are heard. Other questions in the pamphlet were sort of ridiculous. Do you drink every day? Have you ever been sent to jail for drinking? This was the low stuff of gutter drunks to me. I still shopped at the Gap. I had a Winnie the Pooh night lamp. No, I hadn't been sent to jail. And no, I didn't drink every day. And I was relieved to find those questions there because they felt like an exemption, which is stupid because when you're caught up by alcohol, your mind does so many crazy wild things to make you think that it's okay and that you're okay, but you're really not. You're actually really sick and you're under, it's a disease, honestly, alcoholism is. I was a college kid. I love beer. I love the sophisticated sting of red wine. I love the fine and fiery stupor of bourbon. And sometimes I got so wasted that I poured those drinks on my head while performing songs from a chorus line in some twilight state I could not recall. And in the scope of the universe and all of its problems, was this really, really such a big deal? I didn't quit drinking that day. Of course I didn't. But I left the clinic with the notion that alcohol was an escalating madness, and the blackout issue was the juncture separating two kinds of drinking. One kind was a comet in your veins. The other kind left you sunken and cratered, drained of all light. I figured if I stayed in the middle, in the gray area, I would be okay. Blacking out was bad, but it wasn't that big of a deal, right? Yes, it is a big deal. It's a huge deal, especially if you guys are blacking out. That's the number one sign that your alcoholism has set in and the stages of addiction are already there and set in motion. It's not like I was the only person who ever forgot a night of drinking, right? And it's not like it happened to me that often. At a party I threw a few months later, a friend danced in my living room in a giant fish costume. The next morning, as we stared at the shiny fabric in a heap on the floor, she said, Why is that costume there? I was flooded with gratitude, not just me, thank God. I've had those moments too with my friends, like, dude, what happened last night? Or like, one time, actually the first time, I can remember the first time I ever blacked out from alcohol. I actually drove home. I remember driving my uncle home and dropping him off. But then I drove home, but I honestly only remember driving away from the bar and seeing the lights as we passed them, like the street lights in the town, because my uncle only lived a couple of blocks. But the next day when I woke up, I remember I pretty much did a backflip out of bed, seen this like trail of clothes leading to my room, ran over and checked if my car was in the drive. God, I was so thankful that it was, but man, it was my first inclination that I had a serious problem. Just like this girl, when she read that pamphlet, that was the day I realized that, whoa, alcohol's dangerous. Like, I had no idea how I got home or anything the night before. Terrifying, alarming, you know? In my 20s, friends called with that hush in their voice to tell me they'd woken up beside some guy. God, gross. They called after forgotten wedding receptions where the open bar had proven a little too open. Not just me, thank God. In my early 30s, I used to have brunch with a sardonic guy who actually bragged about his blackouts. He called it time travel, which sounded so nifty, like a supernatural power. But see, in reality, that was his way. That was the way his mind was making him accept his behaviors. He was trying to sugarcoat his behaviors to himself because he was embarrassed by them. So he talked about them to expose them to actually make himself get better. You know, anytime we talk about something to another human being or to somebody we think is, you know, smarter than us, it changes the neuroplasticity in our brains completely. And I really do believe that. I was laughing about my blackouts by then too. I used to joke I was creating a show called CSI Hangover because I would be forced to dig around the apartment like a crime scene investigator, rooting through receipts and other detritus, 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 to build a plausible theory of the night's events. I imagined myself crouched by the bed, wearing those blue plastic gloves and picking up each questionable item with long-sleeved tweezers. And in reality, one time I was actually fed Rufalin back in the early 2000s, and I woke up in an RV. People had painted on my face. They had shaved my chest. I was in my underwear, and I was terrified. It was one of the worst feelings in the world, and that was when I first started taking steps to quit drinking, which it did take me 5 years to actually physically stop completely, in which now, you know, obviously I've been sober now for, 10 years. Yeah. Wow, yeah, 10 years, man. That's crazy. Coming up on 11 years. This crumpled wrapper suggests our victim was hungry, I would say, holding the foil and the light and then giving it a long whiff. And this has the unmistakable smell of a beef Mexi melt. It's weird how a woman frightened by her own blackouts becomes a woman who shrugs them off like an unpaid cable bill. But any heavy drinker understands the constant I can't read today. I can't read any day. Redistricting and gerrymandering of what constitutes an actual problem. I'd come to think of blackouts as surcharge for the grand spectacle of drinking. There was something deliciously chaotic about tossing your night up into the air and finding out the next morning what happened. Haven't you seen The Hangover? We definitely have. Let's try not to play that one out. I don't feel like going to jail. But there's a certain point when you fall down the staircase and you look around and no one is amused anymore. By 35, I was in that precarious place where I knew I drank too much. And actually, I was 29. Thank God I wasn't 35. But I believed I could manage it somehow. I was seeing a therapist, and when I talked to her about my blackout, she gasped. I felt her concern. Her tone was alarmist, like the pamphlet I'd once read. But I don't know why doctors do that stuff when you tell them how much you drink. They flip out. I told my heart doctor, he's like, how many beers do you drink in a weekend? I was like, normally about 42. And he was an Eastern Indian doctor, and he screamed out, that is just asinine! I'll never forget it. His face was so red. He yelled out, that is just asinine! I'm like, it is? I thought it was normal. He's like, no, it's not normal. He's like, you're going to kill yourself. So anyways, back to her doctor being an alarm. But a trip to any keg party would illustrate that it blacks out doomed a person to alcoholism, then most of us were doomed. Everyone has blackouts, I told her. She locked eyes with me. No, they don't. And that's the truth. No, they do not. For many years, I was confounded by my blackouts because some people actually have constraints and actually know they've built parameters in their mind and boundaries so that they live a nice, harmonious life. And alcohol will not keep you in harmony, but it will throw you in complete disarray instantly, honestly. But the mechanics are quite simple. The blood reaches a certain alcohol saturation point and shuts down the hippocampus, such a peculiar word, hippocampus, like a children's book character. I imagine a beast with a twitching snout and a big flapping eyelashes, but it's actually the part of the brain responsible for making long-term memories. You drink enough, and the beast stops twitching, shut down, no more memories. Your short-term memory still works, but short-term memory lasts less than 2 minutes, which explains why wasted people can follow a conversation from point to point, but they will repeat themselves after some time has passed. What a friend of mine calls getting caught in the drunkard's loop. The tendency to repeat what you just said is a classic sign of blackout, although there are others. And it's funny because short-term memory loss short-term memory lasts only 2 minutes. I find that interesting. You know, with marijuana actually increases, it actually boosts your hippocampus to make you remember all your memories from your past, but marijuana makes you have short-term memories. So you're like in the middle of a conversation, then you're like, deer in the headlights, and you don't remember anything, what you're talking about for a couple minutes, and then all of a sudden you'll remember. Your eyes go dead like a zombie. A boyfriend once told me, it's like you're not there at all. People in a blackout often get a vacant, glazed look as though their brain is unplugged. And, well, it kind of is. Although some people learn to detect my blackouts, most could not. Blackouts are sneaky like that. They vary from person to person and from night to night. The same way one drunk might put a lampshade on her head while another might sit quietly and stare into the middle distance. There's no red indicator light to alert your audience when the brain is offline. And people in a blackout can be surprisingly functional. This is a point worth underscoring, since the most common misperception about blacking out is confusing it with passing out, losing consciousness after too much booze. But in a blackout, a person is anything but silent and immobile. You can talk and laugh and charm people at the bar with funny stories of your past. You can sing the shit out of Little Red Corvette on the karaoke stage. You can run your greedy hands over a man whose name you never even asked. The next day, your brain will have no imprint of these activities, almost as if they didn't happen. Once memories are lost in a blackout, they can't be coaxed back. Simple logic. Information that wasn't stored cannot be retrieved. And that's just like a computer, because your brain is a computer and your brain is resettable. Some blackouts are worse than others, though. The less severe and more common form is a fragmentary blackout or a blowout. A brownout, which is like a light flickering on and off in the brain. Perhaps you remember ordering your drink but not walking to the bar. Like I said earlier, I remember driving away from the bar, but I do not remember dropping my uncle off or driving home. Perhaps you remember kissing that guy, but not who made the first move. Then there are in-block blackouts. I always blame it on the girl. I always say she made the first move. In-block blackouts were a specialty of mine. The light goes out and does not return for hours sometimes. I usually woke up from those blackouts on the safe shores of the next morning. The only exception was the night in Paris when I zapped back to the world in the hotel room. I didn't even know what could happen. one of the many reasons the night stayed with me so long. We may understand the basics of a blackout, but we still don't understand the nuisances and complications. Is there any territory more vast and unknowable than the human mind? Ask anyone who's lost a parent to dementia or watched a spouse suffer a brain injury. And I talked about that in my last podcast, how I watched that woman deteriorate from frontal lobe dysplasia or Alzheimer's. It was one of the most horrific scenes I had ever seen in my life. I felt so bad for those kids and that husband. It was so horrible. Dementia is nothing to play with, or any kind of brain injuries. What we remember and how and why. This is a complex puzzle best explained by people in lab coats and not a girl who used to drink so much Dasakis she could dip raw hot dogs into guacamole and shove them in her mouth. One of the people in the lab coats is Aaron White, a leading expert in blackouts. White is the program director for college drinking research at the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, and he dispelled some of my own confusion about blackouts. I always thought my blackouts were caused by specific types of liquors, brown liquor in particular. According to White, brown liquor doesn't cause blackouts any more than clear liquor does. It's not the type of drink you put to your lips, it's the amount of alcohol in the blood and how quickly you get to that level. Fragmentary blackouts happen at a blood alcohol content around 0.20, while en-bloc, E-N-B-L-O-C, blackouts happen around 0.30. White is accustomed to people's ignorance about blackouts because ours is a drinking culture disconnected from the dangers of alcohol. Like I said, alcohol is one of the most dangerous drugs on the market. That's why there was a prohibition. That's why they wanted it to be illegal. You know, they knew all the detrimental effects it was having on people and children. And, look at moms, they got, their babies can be born with fetal alcohol syndrome, come on. If they were selling some drug at the gas station that shut down areas of your brain so that you were functioning with amnesia, we wouldn't have it, White says. Katy Perry had a hit song about blackouts in 2011. It was a blackout blur, she sang, and I'm pretty sure it ruled. But White sees blackouts another way. From a clinical perspective, he explains a blackout is like early Alzheimer's. The more I learned about blackouts, the more I wondered why I'd read so little about them. I'd read magazine articles dissecting some drug of the moment, how ecstasy or meth or heroin hijacks the brain. I've read clickbait stories on what new drugs your teens might be using, like eating 15, what is it, like some kind of allergy medication now their kids are trying. It's like, wow, stupid. Mothballs, bath salts. I've seen scared segments on roofies. I've seen scare segments on roofies like the one I saw on that talk show, and yet I've never read a major article or seen a television program discussing blackouts. It's a menace hiding in plain sight. I discussed roofies with Aaron White. Roofies aren't a myth, he said, but studies suggest the fear outpaces the incidents. Turns out being roofied often doesn't involve roofies at all. People just don't realize how common it is to experience a blackout, and alcohol can have troubling interactions with prescription meds. Rufalin is in the benzodiazepine family, often prescribed for anxiety and sleep disorders. Ativan, Xanax, Klonopin, all terrible drugs, you guys, in my eyes. Some of the most popular meds on the market. Hey, I'll tell you a story about Klonopin. I told the doctor that I was really stressed out back in the early 2000s, and he told me, "Oh, here, take this. This will help you." And it was Klonopin. He didn't tell me I couldn't take it before work or after work. I was having a really stressful day, so at lunchtime one day I decided to take a Klonopin at work. I was a supervisor of 20 guys, and I remember one of my guys said, "Dude, have you been drinking?" And I was talking, and then when he said that, the moment he said it, I heard my speech, and it was slurred. I'm like, "No," and I straightened up right away. I'm like, I'm like, you're hearing stuff, man. So I went into the gas station to play it off, and I went into the bathroom, and I hung out in the bathroom until it actually wore off because I was under the influence, and there was no way I was going to be in charge of driving 20 guys around under the influence. So I wound up going back to the van like almost 40 minutes later, and I called my boss, and I told her, I'm like, hey, this is what happened. I'm sorry. I did not know it was going to do this, and I didn't know the effects of it. And she understood, and nothing really happened. Everybody on my crew understood, and we waited it out, which they were getting paid, so they didn't care. Anyways, back to Blackout, Remembering the Things I Drink to Forget by Sarah Hepola. This book was published on June 7, 2016. This is the Only You podcast. Thank you for following me, you guys, and thank you for sharing me with your friends. I hope you enjoy my books that I choose to review and read and let you guys know about. I hope you guys run out and get this one. Sarah's written a really good book, and it helps a lot with alcoholism. It tells you a lot about studies and different doctors that she's been to that has helped her in her recovery process. I think you guys, if you guys want to know more about Sarah Hepola's Blackout problems and remembering the things I drink to forget, I think you should get out there and get it. And like I said, you can find it at Google Play, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, all the normal places I tell you about. My therapist was correct. Not everyone has blackouts. The majority of people will never have one in their lifetime. But blackouts are not rare in drinking circles. In fact, they are common. A 2002 study published in the Journal of American College Health found that among drinkers at Duke University, more than half had experienced blackouts. I was particularly at risk, even though I didn't realize it. Blackout drinkers tend to be the ones who hold their liquor. If you bolt to the toilet after your third Cosmo or start snoring after your second margarita, you won't build up enough booze in your bloodstream to shut the machine down. I was so proud of that way I could knock them back. I drank fast, I drank a lot. I was a beer-binging Annie Oakley, slinging her empties into the trash and popping off the next bottle cap with a sly smile. Want to watch me go again, boys? And I want to say thank you so much for listening to the Only You podcast. I would say this is a great read. It's at Barnes & Noble for $15.99, Amazon for $13.89, Walmart for $9.33, and you can get it on Audible anywhere from $15 to $28. And if you know anybody out there that's suffering from alcoholism, find them an AA meeting. They have AA meetings in every single town across America at some church near you. Try the 12-step program, learn about, learn that you are helpless over your addictions and that you are powerless and that you can't do it without a higher power, and that's what the 12 steps are about, is empowering you to realize your shortcomings and to give you the discipline you need to become a better person. And thank you guys for listening to me. I hope I'm doing all right. I know I stutter a lot, and I know I'm a chatterbox, but hopefully my stories are, endearing to you and enlightening, so you know that I am a real person, that I've been through so much stuff that you guys wouldn't believe, but I've also turned my entire life around. I've met tons of famous people. I've been in tons of famous people's houses. When I was out in Phoenix, I used to do air conditioning. I used to do, Joe Borowski's air, the commentator of the Diamondbacks. I used to do Eric Bledsoe's air conditioning for, the Phoenix Suns. And all those people, they're famous, but they also have suffered from blackouts, believe it or not. Maybe they don't talk about it. Maybe they're not out there like Sarah Hepola writing, Blackout, remembering the things I drink to forget. But, you guys need to get out there and get this book. It's only going to help you. And thank you for listening. This is your boy, Lo Jackson. Until next time.